Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are looking into Infosys reactjs interview experience question and answers. So all the question answers which we are discussing in this video, they are based upon the real interview experience which is shared by candidate. And one important thing which I have to say you before starting the questions is I've already made a video on Infosys reactjs interview experience. I'll be attaching the link of that video in description so you can check that video too. That video is basically for the round one. So once the candidate was selected for the round one of Infosys interview, then he was invited for second round. And in this video, all the questions which we are discussing are for the round two. So in round one, they were basic and easy questions which any candidate should be knowing to clear the interview. And in this interview, there are senior level and little difficult questions which you should be knowing, and you would have worked on that in your experience also. If in case you have not worked on it in real world, at least you should be knowing that topic so that you are able to answer the question. So this was the expectation from from this interview. So let's begin our video. So the first question which was asked was, what are solid principles? So solid principle, they are not specific to react.js. If you're developing application, you're into web development in any technology, you're using any technology, solid principle is a must have thing which every developer should be knowing, that how we have to develop application using what principles, so that our application, our code, it is more understandable, it is more flexible, and we can add extra things later on, so it should be maintainable. So this is about the principle, solid principle. How you can answer this question is, solid, it is set of 5 design principles for writing the maintainable, scalable, and understandable flexible code in object oriented programming. So 5 design principles of solid are SOLID. S stands for single responsibility principle. What does single responsibility principle mean? It means that a class, it should have only one reason to change, meaning it should have only one job, or it should have only one responsibility. So if there is any class, it should be having only one responsibility or one job, and any change to it, there should be only one reason how that class can change. So any other changes in any other class shouldn't affect this class. So that is called a single responsibility principle, that your class is going to have only one job or only one responsibility in the whole application. Next, O, it stands for open closed principle. So OCP, that is open closed principle, it is nothing but that software entities, they should be open for extension. So if you're trying to add something extra, then they should be open. Okay, so your entity, they should be open for extension, but they should be closed for any modification. So if you want to do any kind of modification, then that is not allowed, they should be closed. So they will be open for new functionality without altering the existing code. That is about open closed principle. Next is L, that is Liskov substitution principle. So Liskov substitution principle, it is nothing but that your objects of the superclass, they should be replaceable with the objects of the subclass without affecting the correctness of the program. So if you're having some superclass and then you have some subclass, okay, so object of the superclass, you are having one more object of the superclass, that object of the superclass should be replaceable by the object of the subclass. So suppose you are having certain functionalities in the superclass, and in subclass you have restricted few, so third one you are not doing. So in that case, your Liskov substitution principle doesn't apply, right? Because you might not, if your object is here, you cannot substitute the object of superclass by subclass, because subclass is not having one of the functionality. So you can replace only if all of the functionality of superclass is achieved. So this is about the Liskov substitution principle, that the object of superclass, they should be replaceable with the object of subclass without affecting the correctness of the program. That is about the Liskov substitution principle. Next is I, which stands for interface segregation principle. So in interface segregation principle, this says that clients, they should not be forced to depend on the interface that they do not use, and it promotes the smaller and more specific interface. So if client is not using any interface, then they should not be forced to depend on that interface. And this also promotes like making use of some specific interface which is useful for the client, and also making use of some smaller instances, right, interfaces. Because if it is not useful and you keep on adding, your application becomes bigger and it will not be maintainable in future. That is about the interface segregation principle. Next, the last is D, which stands for dependency inversion principle. So dependency inversion principle, it is like the high level modules should not depend on the low level modules, but should depend on the abstraction. So if you're having the high level modules, so they shouldn't be dependent on the lower level modules, and they can depend on the abstraction but not completely on the low level modules. That is about the dependency inversion principle. And these principles, they are helpful for the developers to create more resilient, maintainable code and clean, testable, and loosely coupled code. So these are few advantages of solid principles. You can say, even if you don't remember the exact abbreviations of what solid is, at least you can say that they are useful for making maintainable, scalable, and flexible code in object oriented programming. And what are the use is like making your code clean, testable, loosely coupled, and resilient, and of course maintainability is an important factor. So this is about the solid principle. The next question which was asked was, how does hydration work in React? So before knowing how hydration works in React, we should be knowing what hydration is. So hydration, it is nothing but it is a process where the React takes the server rendered HTML and attaches the event listener to make it interactive on the client side. This is about the hydration. That hydration is nothing but it is going to take the HTML, server rendered HTML from the server, and it is going to attach the event listener at the client side so that it is interactive for the client. And it is useful in the frameworks like next.js to optimize the performance for SEO and the initial load. So how hydration works is, let us try to understand. Like now we have seen the definition, but how it normally works. So what happens, suppose you're having your client here and you have your server here, okay? So the first step, what happens is, in first step you send a get request to the server that I want to access your website, okay? You are sending your get request first to the server. So here you have sent your get request. So what server will do, server is going to execute your all application logic at server. So all your application logic is getting executed here. So all your application logic is executed here. This is the second step. Then in third step, what happens in server, okay, not in client side, in server, what happens, it is going to render your HTML at server. This is happening. So this hydration and all, it is useful for server side rendering. So there are two types of rendering normally. That is, first is client side rendering and one more is server side rendering. So client side rendering is what we normally do with React, and then we have server side rendering where hydration is important. So what we are discussing here, it is basically server side rendering, and it is mostly useful with the frameworks like Next.js. But yeah, since this was the question asked in the interview, we are discussing on what is hydration. So first step, which was you sent a get request, second your application logic got executed on server, and third is your HTML got rendered on your server, and then this HTML is sent to the client as a response. So normally in client side rendering, what happens, you are sent with the JavaScript, right? You get your HTML, you get your CSS, you get your JavaScript. But here with server side rendering and in hydration, what happens, you are getting a HTML page, you are getting server rendered HTML page. So this is what you get in the response from server to client. So once this you have got, so 1 2 3, this is your fourth step, that you got a server rendered HTML. This is what we read in the definition also, you got server rendered HTML. This was our fourth step. Then once you have got the HTML, server rendered HTML, so in fifth point, from your client you are going to render whatever you have got. So you just got the server rendered HTML, but you have to show it on client, right? What is your client? Your client is your browser. So you have to render it on your browser, that is, you have to render it on the client. So once you have rendered that HTML on client, again client is going to send the request to get the JS. That is your sixth step. So with this sixth step, now you just got your HTML page. Now you have to also add the interactivity, right? Where is your interactivity written? It is written in the JS, JavaScript. So now client is going to again ask a request for the JS files, that give me the logic, what are they. Then you will again get the seventh. So server is going to normally give you the JS files as a response. So that JS files you will get it as response to the client. And once you have got, then there is eighth and ninth step at the client. Eighth step is again you will execute all your logic here. So what logic? All your JavaScript logic are going to get run in the client side again. And then ninth point, that is ninth step, it is here is where you do the hydration. Okay, so hydration happens at the client level. So here is where you write your hydration. So hydration is nothing but you will be binding all your event listeners to whatever the rendered HTML page you got. So logic you will get from JS, you will get the logic. All of these logic via event listeners you will be adding to your HTML. This is called as hydration. This is the steps which are there in hydration, and this is how it works in React or in Next.js. In Next.js also you make use of the JavaScript. It is a framework, so this is how it works. And in case they ask you to write a code or give an example, then you can write a normal code example, right? Like you have to take the import the react dom from react dom client and app from your app file, and then you can write react dom dot hydrate root, and you're just getting that document dot get element by id root. So the html document which you get, HTML element which you get from the server side, it would be having ID of root. So you are just writing that you have to hydrate it, hydrate root. You have to make use of hydrate root here. So if from React DOM, you're hydrating your HTML, the actual your app, the actual root div. So this is how your hydration works. Next, our third question which was asked was what is difference between microtask queue and macrotask queue. So microtask queue and macrotask queue, they are helpful for executing your asynchronous code via event loop. So microtask queue runs before the next event loop, even if the macro tasks are waiting. So let's try to understand the difference clearly. So first we have microtask queue and then we have macrotask queue. So in microtask queue, what are the callback functions which are stored? So callback functions stored in microtask queue are promise dot then, promise dot catch, finally, and queue microtask. And in macrotask queue, you have set timeout, set interval, and input output operations. Okay, so in set timeout, set interval also we have our callback functions, right? So those callback functions are stored in the macrotask queue. So whenever event loop sees that our call stack is empty, so event loop is going to first come and check the microtask queue. So because microtask queue is having higher priority when compared to macrotask queue, so event loop will check that is there any callback function, any asynchronous code that has to be executed at priority. So in case there is some promise function, callback function, then it is going to take those function and put it in call stack, and your call stack is going to execute your code. So even if there is some macro task having multiple number of callback functions to be executed, but still event loop is going to give priority to micro task queue. And then once micro task queue is empty, then your macro task queues will be executed because it is having lower priority when compared to micro task queue. So these are the two important difference. You can say that what are the callback functions. In microtask queue we store the promises, callback functions of promises, and in macrotask there are set timeout, set interval, and the input output operation related tasks. And priority wise you can say microtask queue they have higher priority, whereas macrotask queue they have the lower priority. Let's see our fourth question. What are generator functions and how are they different from async functions? So generator function, they can be used to pause or resume the task by making use of keyword called yield. So generator functions they are mostly useful with the redux saga, but normally let us not discuss on the redux saga, but normal generator functions they are helpful for pausing or resuming your code using the yield keyword. And whereas the async function, here they have asked the difference between generator and async, right? So what is async function? They return a promise. So whenever you're writing async function, so before await, like inside your function you'll have await. So if there is anything await in your function where you're declaring, there you have to make use of keyword of async. So if you made your function to be async, if any function is async, it is going to return a promise. Always it is going to return a promise, and it runs the asynchronous code, that is any API call, until completion. So async function, it is going to return you promise, and promise will eventually give you a completion status, whether it failed or it succeeded or whatever that was, but it is going to run some code asynchronously until it has completed. Like whether it was succeeded or failed is a secondary thing, but there should be some completion. So that is the difference, that generator function they are used for some other kind of task where we want to pause or resume our work, whereas async they are useful for the asynchronous code or for the API calls which return us the promise. Okay, so you can say they are like two different function for two different use cases, but yeah, you have to give the definitions at least. Like we can normally say the difference if there is some similarity between two functions, but still they are asking for difference, then we can say. But here generator and async functions, they are useful for like very different use cases. But since they have asked you, you have to say that whatever you know about this generator function and what you know about async function. So async is completely different. They are useful for execution of asynchronous code, whereas generator functions, they are useful for pausing or resuming some kind of task. So generator functions, generators, they give you more manual control, whereas async feels more automatic, right? Because it might give you promise, and promise might get resolved or rejected sometime after. We don't know what will happen. But whereas generator, they give you manual control, that what do you want to console, what do you want to do. So this is the difference. Let's see a code example of the generator function. So if you want to make your function generator, you have to write a asterisk after function. That is how you can make your function generator function. And in case you don't give this asterisk and you just make use of yield keyword, you will get error. You cannot make use of yield without making your function generator function. So normal, this is very normal. Like you have to make use of the function keyword, then give a asterisk and the function name, and then you have like multiple tasks, and before that you have to write the yield, that once the above task is done, then only next task will be done. Like how you can pause by using yield, you can pause or resume. So here you can see we have called this get numbers function, and then we got a iterator, and then with this iterator we can write gen dot next dot value. You will get 1. So 2 3 and all is not printed. If you just write normal, no, normal function with consoles, if you just execute it, all 1 2 3 will get executed, will be logged together. But here you can see it is not logged, only one got logged. Now if you want to log another like yield 2, you want to log 2, then again you will have to call with the iterator only gen dot next dot value, then only you will have 2. So once you have consoled 2, then it will stop there, like your function is paused there. Now again if you want to resume it, again you'll have to use gen dot next dot value, and then you will get 3 in your console. So this is how generator functions work, and I hope you have understood the difference between generator and async function. Now let's go to the fifth question. What is currying? Write a curried function. So they had asked to share the screen, and they had asked like how will you write a curried function. So let's see what is currying. Currying, it is transforming your function with the multiple arguments into the sequence of functions that each take a single argument. So normally if someone gives you to write a multiply function, so how will you write? You will write the same thing, multiply, and then here you will be expecting two arguments, okay, a comma b. Here you will ask that from what I have to multiply what. And once you have taken the two arguments, you'll just write return. This is what you will write, return a into b. So this is what you will write. This is your normal function. But if you have to write a curried function, how you write a curried function? With curried function, you expect only one argument in each function. So you will expect only one argument, not two argument. This is your regular function, normal function. But with a curried function, you will expect only one argument in the first function, and then you're just returning another function. And then that another function is again going to expect another argument, and then inside that inner function you are going to write your logic. So you can see here what we have done. We have written multiply 2. So one second, let me clear everything. Yeah, so you can see multiply of 2. What is this multiply? This is this function multiply, and you're passing 2. So what is coming here? What is multiply taking as argument? It is taking 2 as the value, and then what is it doing? It is doing nothing. It is just returning you a function. So this function is returned, so it didn't do anything. Now this multiply of 2 got replaced by another function, and what is that function? We saw it is this function, and now this function is expecting a argument, that is b. So in this function, you are passing 3, right? This is what you're passing. So you have passed 3 here in the inner function, and then this inner function, this b becomes 3. What is this b? B is getting the value 3. That is what we have passed. And then inside this, you are writing your logic, return a star b. That is a into b. That is how you are multiplying. So this is what is called as currying function, where you transform the function which was taking multiple argument. How you normally did, you just wrote a comma b normal function into sequence of functions. See, there is a sequence of functions. We have first function, then we have second function, and then we might have multiple sequence of functions here that take that each of that function they take single argument. So here we have only single argument, here we have only single argument, and accordingly we will be accepting only single argument in every function. And why is this currying useful? This is useful for composition and reusability. Now let's see our sixth question. How would you implement a retry mechanism for API call? So this question was asked basically that if you have any API and it did not give you a response, or there was some issue, you got a error, you did not get correct response from your API, you got a error. But what you have to do, you cannot show that okay API failed, you cannot show that, you have to again try for 3 times, you have to try hitting the same API 3 times. So how would you achieve that? So how we can achieve that? We will see a code example, and we can see the advantage. You can say that it is helpful, like retry mechanism. It is helpful for adding the reliability by retrying the failed request. So if you got any error, your API did not give you response, so you can retry 3 times. So it is helpful for the reliability purpose. So let's see a code example. For code example, this is like normal async function fetch with retry, and then you are writing try and catch block, and in try like normal way you are writing await fetch URL. So this is the fetch API, and you are passing the URL like your API URL. And in case there is error, so normally if you call any API, it will come to try, it is going to give you, like it is going to call the API and it is going to return you the value. In case there was error, so errors are cached in, like they are handled in catch block, right? So E here is basically the argument for error. So in case you got, like first time you tried hitting the API, you tried it in try block, but it didn't give you correct value, there was some error, then it will come in the catch block. In catch block you are checking retries. So what is retry? We are passing retries here as a default parameter as 3, that 3 times you have to try. So we are checking if retries is 0, like have we reached that retry limit? No, we have not reached yet, right? So you will not execute this. So this if block is pending for now. So what will happen? This if didn't get executed, you are calling this function, that is fetch with retry again. So what is this fetch with retry? This is this function. Okay, so you are calling fetch with retry function again, and you are subtracting it, that now I have called it one time, execute it again, 3 minus 1 becomes true, 2. So it is basically like one time I have called, one time I have tried, but now again you have to try. So again you will come here, you will try to call that API, you might get error, then you will come to catch block and you will check that is 2 equal to 0, no, right? Then you will again call this API, and then 2 minus 1 becomes what? 2 minus 1 becomes 1, right? And then if you have got 1, till now we have tried for 2 times, now this is the last time when we can execute, like when we can call API, then again your this function will be called, and then you're trying. And if this is the third time, this is the third time, next time we called, so third time if you got any error, you will come in catch block and you will check that okay, this was the third time we tried, is 1 equal to 0, no, then you will just return like okay, let me try calling this API again, but this time 1 minus 1 becomes 0, right? 1 minus 1 becomes 0. So once you have done 3 times retry, next time if you get any API call, like API request, it is API response, then it is fine. In case you did not get, now your retry would have become 0, and then you will throw error that we are not getting any response, correct response from API. So this was the expectation for you to write. Even if you are not able to write the exact whole code, at least you can give them the idea that we can have something called as default parameter, and in case we have like got multiple times error, we can throw the error. And then this 3 4 5, anything depends upon the interviewer, you can ask them how many times are we allowed to retry. This is about the sixth question. Now seventh question which was asked was, what happens when you type a URL in browser and press enter? So if you're trying to access any application, so what happens, how does that happen? So first step, what happens is DNS lookup. What is full form of DNS? DNS is abbreviation of domain name system. That is whatever is your domain name, that will get converted to the IP, like it is going to search the exact IP address of your domain of your application, and you will get the IP address, and then you can hit that application with that IP address to that server. So first thing what happens is DNS lookup, then there is a TCP handshake. Then once handshake is done, it is connected, your client and server are connected over a connection. Then what happens, you send a HTTP request. Okay, so you are sending some kind of request that, okay, I want to access this application, I'm trying to log in, or I'm trying to access some kind of photos, whatever it is. So HTTP request is sent, and then server processes the request. So server is accepting your request, and it is going to process. If there is any kind of check from backend which has to be done, then it is going to do that check. If it has to fetch you some data from DB, so anything, like whatever is the request, it server is going to process, whether it is related to DB or it is related to authentication, whatever is the request, it is going to process. Server is going to process your request, and then HTTP response is sent. So if server has processed, how will client know? Like if you tried logging in, you sent your request, and then server also did the check, okay, you are a valid user, but how will user know? Like how will you be able to log in? How will you be able to navigate from login page to the actual application page? For that we need some kind of response from server, right? So that HTTP response is sent via our server, and once that is sent, what happens? Browser, that is our client, it is going to parse the HTML. We are going to get the HTML, we are going to get CSS, JavaScript from the server for the application. So browser is going to get those HTML, and it is going to download the images, it is going to download CSS, JavaScript files. So once all of these are DOM is made, so JavaScript execution happens, and whatever is the DOM, it is rendered on your browser. So this is what happens when you type a URL in browser and you're trying to access application. Now, let's see our eighth question. Eighth question which was asked was, what is CI/CD, and explain your experience using it. So let's see definition. CI stands for continuous integration, and it is helpful for automatically building and testing the code whenever we have pushed our code. So that is what is continuous integration. Whereas coming to CD, that is continuous deployment or delivery. So it is basically automatically deploying the code after the tests pass. And what are tests? So test can be a lint test, it can be any error kind of test, like your code is not having any error and build is proper. So that is what your tests mean. So you can give example, like in my project we have made use of GitHub actions for CI/CD. So if you made use of GitHub, you can give GitHub example. But if you have made use of GitLab, so they have their own. So you can give whatever is your experience, you can say that. So this is just a normal experience which I have written from my end. So you can say in my project we have used the GitHub actions for CI/CD. On every pull request, that is you are trying to submit your code to the repository, for every pull request, the CD pipeline ran the test and lint check. So we have multiple lint, like sooner lint, ESLint. So all of those lints, if they are successful, that tests are run. So that is done by CI, that is continuous integration, and it happens only when you are pushing your code, that is you have made a pull request. This is about CI. Then once the code is merged to the main branch, then deployment happened automatically to the staging and production. So that is done by continuous deployment or delivery, that is CD. So this is about the CI CD, you can explain. Now next question which was asked was, explain the course and how to resolve the related issues. So course, it's abbreviation of cross origin resource sharing. So it's a browser security feature that restricts the API access from the different origins or the domains. So suppose your server is deployed on some domain, on some origin. Okay, let us see example, like it is deployed on b.com. Your server is at b.com, whereas your client, it might be on something like a.in. Okay, there are different, these are deployed on the different domains or different origins. So this is our client at a.in, and our server is at b.com. So what browser does, browser is providing us with a security feature that is going to restrict the API access from different origins. So there are different domains, right? Client is a different domain. So if server, they have configured that someone from other domain cannot access my API, you cannot call my API, I will not give you any response. So that is being done from server side. So if you are trying to access this API which is at b.com, you are not allowed, you cannot have your multiple requests on API, because sometimes hackers also, they try to send multiple requests to the API, so that uh, like there is some performance issue in the API, so that it doesn't work properly. These are some techniques used by hackers and all. So in that case, browser is giving you the this security feature. Like if the backend has not configured that you cannot use it from a dot in, then browser itself will not allow you to send the request to this API. So how is this configured? It is configured by making use of access control allow origin property. It is header property. So to add a proper header, so how to fix course error? To add by adding a proper headers like access control allow origin star on the server. So these are the header properties. If you open your browser, you can see that you have in DevTools, you can see that there is a property called access control or allow origin in the response header. If it is star, star means that anyone from any domain can access me. But in case if they just write the same domain like b.com, right, if they write the same domain here, then only the client which is deployed on b.com, let us suppose there is one more client with which is deployed on b.com which is similar to your client. So in case this is mentioned that b.com applications can send requests to API, then browser is going to allow you. But with a.in, it might not allow you. This is how CORS work. That is a browser security feature. So how to fix it? By making use of this header, and you cannot fix it. This is from backend. Like backend has to configure, server has to configure. That is access control allow origin. Else we can make use of proxy in the dev environment. This is also one of the way of how we can resolve this issue. Let's see our 10th question. How will you migrate the Angular app to the React app, and what will be your approach? So this was the question asked to candidate, that in case you have an application which is already present in Angular, but our clients, they want a newer version. They don't want it in Angular, but they want it in React now, in React technology. So how will you migrate it? So these are few of the options which you can say, few of the steps. So in case you already have your experience, so you can share your experience. But in case you don't have, but you're just trying to answer the question, so you can make use of these answers what I have written. So first we have to analyze the feature parity between the apps. So certain features are already there in Angular, but in React that might not be there. In React we'll have to make use of third party library, right? So those features parity we'll have to check between the apps. We have to analyze them. Then we have to break down the Angular modules into React components. So in Angular, since it is a framework, we have the modules in Angular, but whereas in React it is component based library, right? So we have to break down those Angular modules into the React component, that how many components will we be having in our React application. Next, we have to set up our React app by Vite or CRA or Next.js. So CRA is nothing but create React app, but mostly Vite is what is used uh, because it is easier. It also provides us with the performance optimization and bundle optimization. So anything like whatever is fine with your new team that you can use. So you have to set up a new React app, new React project with anything like Vite or CRE or Next.js. And then you have to migrate the services. So replace the Angular services with custom hooks or context. So all the services which are available for Angular, that you have to migrate. And then you have to make use of TypeScript to ensure the safe migration. So since Angular is a framework, it already had the type safety checks and all, but with React we have option. We can just make use of JavaScript or TypeScript, but since you are working on the real world project, you have to make use of TypeScript because it is helpful for debugging purpose, and it ensures the type checks, and it is useful for safer migration. So TypeScript you can mention so that you have some like good impression on your interviewer, that you will make use of TypeScript, because with JavaScript we get so many errors and it is difficult for anyone to debug on any issue, or if there is any bug, then it becomes difficult with JavaScript. So you can say that okay, we will also make use of TypeScript for safer migration, because in React TypeScript is not compulsory, it's on you. Like if you want to use it, you can use it, else you can skip and you can just use JavaScript. But still, for real world projects, if you see in companies, we make use of TypeScript. Then you have to migrate all the API calls, stylings, routing, and testing gradually. So all the routings and all, how many pages are there, all routings you have to check. You have to check all the styles, and then API calls, all these things should be migrated. And testings you can do gradually one by one when you're developing your screens. So this is how you can migrate your Angular app to the React app. Now let's see 11th question. If you are a team lead and there is a fresher on your team who is underperforming, and there is a client escalation on him or her, so how are you going to handle it? So if you already have your experience in this, then you can give your answer. But in case you don't have, you can directly say that till now I never had a position, I never got an opportunity to be a team lead. But yeah, in case if I in future I get this opportunity and I am facing such issues, if I get to know such things, then these are the things which I would ensure so that that fresher is performing well. So these are the answers which I have written, but in case you have something extra, you can add those things in your interview. So let's see what I have written. You can talk privately to that fresher and understand their blocker, that what is blocking them if they're not understanding something, or what is the issue with them. So you can talk to them privately since you're team lead, so you have to understand what are the blockers. And then you have to reassure to your client that you are addressing it. Your client should be knowing that you are taking action on it. If there is any blocker, if there is any issue, you're trying to solve that. Since there was a client escalation, so there should be some transparency with your client also, that you are addressing that issue. So your client should be knowing that you are knowing the problem and you're trying to fix it. And then third thing is, you can provide the mentorship or the support to the fresher. You can tell that what are the courses, what are the resources they have to see, then what are the KT sessions they have to see. You can give them KT, so you can basically give them the mentorship and support. Now next is, set the clear short-term goals and track the progress. So if he or she is a fresher, then you can give them the short-term goals, that in 2 weeks we are planning that you will at least make this component, or you will do at least this much course. And then you can track the progress if he is able to do. Like you can say them that for 1 week you can do this course, and for 1 week you are going to work on this component. So you can have the short-term goals and you can track the progress, that after studying, if their blockers, if their problems got resolved, if he is able to perform well now. So you can track the progress by that. You can give them course also, you can check by the real coding what he is doing. So that is how you can track the progress. And you can pair them with a senior for knowledge sharing or shadowing purpose. So if there is any other senior above him, that he can guide him, at least the fresher can do the shadowing, that he can see how work normally is done. So you can pair them with a senior for knowledge sharing, and you can schedule the frequent check-ins and communication back to the client. So you can give a proper transparent information and communication to the client, that these are the progress which we have seen, these are the knowledge which he has got, these are the work which he has done. So all these things you can communicate back to your client. This is about the 11th question. Now 12th question which was asked to the candidate was, there was a API given to the candidate, and he was asked to call that API and show the list of employees in the table format. Now we are not having that API URL exactly, but this was the question asked. So I've just written a pseudo code which you can make use of. So this is not the exact, this is not the correct API URL, this is just a dummy one, but I've just written a pseudocode so that at least you understand how you have to call the API and how you have to display it in the table format. So exact URL we are not having, but let's see the code how we can do it normally. So this is our employee table component, and then we are having the employees, set employees via use state. So this is a use state of the type array. And then we have use effect. So use effect, how do we write use effect? With, for the use effect hook, we have to make use of the use effect hook. And then dependency is empty array. Empty array means, empty array is nothing but that your use effect will run only once. So when your component is rendered, only for first time it is going to run. So you're calling your API, and then you are handling that API call. So APIs generally give you promises, right? So how do you handle? You have to make use of dot then dot catch. So dot then you have written 2 times. So whatever is the response, you are converting it to response.json, and you would have got data. So you're setting it in your array, this array, set employee array. So you're setting all of your data in the array, state array, employees. And then in case there was some error, you're just writing dot catch console dot error. So this is important thing, because if they've given you API URL, mostly it would not throw you error. But yeah, in case they have asked you to write question, to write the coding, then they might be assessing you on how you write code, how well you write code. So dot catch dot then and all you have to write. Then in return, what you can see is, you have to write a table component, like table tag. And then in table you have your heading, and then you have your body. So in heading, what do we see? In heading we have one row, and in that we have like the headings as name and salary. So your table will be something like this. So this is your heading, and in first you will have your name, and then you will have your salary. This is about your table heading. Then inside your table body, what you have inside your table body, you are trying to map over your employees array. that is stored here. So you stored your data here, right, from your API call. So all of these data are stored in the employee. So you are looping over this employee array, and then you are getting the value individually. EMP is like individual values, and then you are writing the rows multiple times. So if there are 50 employees, so 50 times this map would run, and then there will be 50 rows. So you are trying to loop over that employee, and then this key you have to give, else you will get a warning in your console that key is mandatory if you're making use of map. And then in this row, so this tr is basically pointing that there is a row. Tr is nothing but table row. And then we have td is your table data. So emp dot employee data will be something like Shruti. And then emp dot employee salary will be some salary, okay, some digit salary. So this is how you will be showing the employee name, employee information, like list of employee and their salary in the table format. So this you can use, but exactly we are not sure that what was the format of the API response, but I assume that it would be array of object. So here we have array, and then there would be multiple objects. So with how do we handle the properties of object, how do we access it? By making use of dot property, right? So that here emp is basically a object. So this whole employee is array of object, this individual is object. So we are writing emp dot employee name, emp dot employee salary. So this is how you can call a API and show the list of employees in table format in React. Yeah, we have discussed on all of the important questions which were asked in the round 2 of Infosys interview questions. So if you found this video to be helpful, then do give a like to this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you have any feedback or suggestion, or you want me to make video on any other topic, then you can let me know in the comment section. And thanks for watching, everyone.